Three Venezuelan warships raced across the Caribbean Sea toward a U.S. Navy carrier strike group. Their formation was tight, their speed aggressive, and their intent unmistakable. This wasn't some routine patrol or friendly check-in. This was a challenge. A deliberate, high-stakes maneuver aimed at provoking the most powerful navy in the world. 12 nautical miles off the Venezuelan coast, international waters, by every legal definition, was where the U.S. Navy's USS George Washington was sailing. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. It was flanked by the USS Gravely, a guided missile destroyer, and monitored from above by an M-60 Seahawk helicopter, circling with surveillance precision. The carrier strike group was operating fully within its rights. But Venezuela? Venezuela had other ideas. As the three Venezuelan vessels closed the distance, it became clear they weren't just approaching, they were attempting to block. High speed, tight formation, visual signals flashing. This wasn't about firepower. This was psychological. Maritime chess. Venezuela was asserting what it claimed as sovereign territory over open, international waters, and they wanted to see how far they could push it. What unfolded next wasn't your typical standoff. No warning shots. No shouting matches over open comms. Just silence. Deliberate, loaded silence. The U.S. Navy didn't flinch. Instead, the USS Gravely moved smoothly into position. No threat. No escalation. Just a soft block, military speak for strategic positioning designed to deter without aggression. The destroyer placed itself directly in the Venezuelan path, subtly forcing them to reconsider. The Seahawk helicopter remained overhead, feeding real-time visuals back to the carrier group. Every movement was measured. Every action had purpose. Now, this is where it gets tense. The Venezuelans maintained their approach, pushing forward with their fast patrol craft. They weren't broadcasting over the radio. Instead, they relied on visual signaling flags hoisted to assert a territorial claim that no international body recognized. It was symbolic, provocative, and designed to test the U.S. Navy's discipline. But here's the thing. In this kind of standoff, silence can speak louder than any weapon system. And for minutes that felt like hours, both sides just watched, analyzing, waiting. Who would flinch first? Spoiler, it wasn't the Americans. The USS Gravely angled its main gun not in a threatening way, but as a quiet reminder, a passive signal, preparedness without provocation. Sensors were active, but weapons stayed cold. The posture was clear. We see you, we're ready, and we're not moving. What Venezuela didn't expect was that resolve, that refusal to overreact. Because this wasn't just about one standoff, it was about the bigger picture. Freedom of navigation, rules-based order, the right to operate in international waters without intimidation. The U.S. Navy was sending a message, not just to Venezuela, but to anyone else watching. Eventually, the cracks started to show. The Venezuelan formation loosened. Speed dropped. The patrol vessels, once surging forward with confidence, began drifting. Not retreating in a panic, just slowly backing off. No dramatic U-turns. No final act of defiance. Just a subtle fade from confrontation. And just like that, the tension dissolved. No shots fired. No direct communication exchanged. Just presence, posture, and professionalism. Let's pause here for a second. Because what just happened wasn't about outgunning the opposition. It wasn't about showing dominance through brute force. It was about showing up, standing firm, and letting discipline speak for itself. Venezuela's maneuver wasn't accidental. It was a textbook example of modern-day maritime brinkmanship, testing the line, probing responses, and trying to assert claims through positioning instead of diplomacy. It's the kind of thing we've seen more and more in contested waters around the world. But this time, the response was surgical. The U.S. didn't escalate. It didn't take the bait. It held course. That alone is a masterclass in naval deterrence. Because while missiles and guns might make headlines, it's the quiet readiness, the calm response under pressure, that actually deters aggression. Let's be clear, the US Navy could have responded forcefully. It had every legal right to defend its position, but it didn't need to. The silent rotation of a gun mount, the movement of a destroyer into a blocking position, the passive presence of airborne surveillance, all of it told a story, one that didn't require a single word. Meanwhile, Venezuela's signals those flags hoisted in defiance. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Sent a message too, one that relied on symbolism over strategy, an attempt to claim legitimacy through performance. But in international waters, performance isn't enough. And in this case, the silence of the US response only highlighted the weakness in Venezuela's approach. It's worth noting how strategic patience played into all of this. The US Navy didn't rush. It didn't react impulsively. It simply maintained its posture, trusted its training, and allowed the pressure to build until it didn't need to anymore. That kind of control isn't just impressive, it's essential. Especially in a world where small provocations can spiral into big consequences. The takeaway? This wasn't a showdown in the traditional sense. It was a demonstration of presence, of operational discipline, of how calm strength can often achieve more than aggressive posturing ever could. And make no mistake, people were watching. Regionally and globally, this wasn't just about the Caribbean. It was about setting the tone for maritime interactions everywhere. About reinforcing that international waters aren't up for reinterpretation, and about showing that the US Navy doesn't need to flex muscles to make a point. It just needs to show up. There's a quiet power in that, in the idea that the most effective form of deterrence is simply being there, not threatening, not posturing, just present, unbothered, resolute. And that's exactly what happened here. As the Venezuelan ships pulled back, the U.S. carrier strike group held course. Business as usual, mission uninterrupted, no gloating, no escalation, just steady, disciplined momentum forward. So, what's the broader lesson? Presence over firepower, communication through posture, strategy through silence. The rules of engagement at sea are evolving. It's no longer just about who has the bigger arsenal, it's about who has the cooler head, the sharper strategy, the stronger sense of purpose. And in this case, the US Navy walked that line perfectly. The USS Gravely and USS George Washington didn't need to win a fight. They just needed to not lose their focus. And in doing so, they reaffirmed a truth that's easy to forget in today's chaos-filled headlines. Sometimes, the strongest statement is the one you don't shout. And Venezuela? They got the message, loud and clear, without a single shot fired. If you're into stories like this where real-world power plays unfold in silence and strategy instead of explosions, make sure to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe for more breakdowns of the biggest global showdowns you didn't see coming. Thanks for watching. What made this encounter so captivating wasn't the possibility of a firefight, it was how close it could have come to one and how it didn't. That edge of your seat tension, where two sides lock horns without ever touching triggers, is the modern battlefield. And you were watching it unfold on the open sea, not with missiles, but with willpower. Let's talk about that silence again. Not the poetic kind, the tactical kind. When those three Venezuelan ships barreled forward, radio silent, they were sending a message. A message that basically said, we're here, we're not backing down, and we're not going to ask permission. That silence, that's more than just a lack of noise. In naval encounters, silence is pressure. It's a stare down without blinking. You don't speak because your presence is the message. But the US Navy understood the game. They've played it before, and they've won it by not playing into provocation. They didn't respond with a show of force, they responded with a demonstration of discipline. Which, let's be real, arguably harder. Especially when you've got three ships trying to block a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier group just because they feel like testing the boundaries of international law. When the USS gravely slipped into position between the Venezuelan ships and the George Washington, that wasn't just a defensive move. That was a calculated signal, a quiet one, but crystal clear to anyone watching. We see what you're doing, and we're not here to be bullied. And what's wild is that everything the US did was technically passive. No aggressive maneuvers, no threats, no warnings screamed over loudspeakers. Just the rotation of the main gun, a subtle flex. Sensors activated. Flight deck quiet but alert. Helicopter overhead. You think nobody notices a Seahawk circling above, watching everything like a hawk? That alone can shut down an entire offensive. Now, let's rewind and really consider the stakes. International waters are governed by one key principle: freedom of navigation. It's a rule that makes global shipping, military presence, and maritime movement possible without every nation turning the ocean into its own backyard. Venezuela trying to claim otherwise, even symbolically, isn't just about one incident. It's about testing international boundaries, both legally and politically. Because in situations like this, escalation is the trap. The minute you engage, the second you overreact, you give your opponent exactly what they want: a reason to say you caused the conflict, a reason to rewrite the narrative. Instead, the US kept things boringly professional, which, in this context, is the ultimate power move. The Venezuelan ships slowed. Their tight formation broke apart. Whatever message they were trying to send, it started unraveling. Because if you're trying to intimidate someone, and they don't even acknowledge the threat, you've already lost control of the situation. Now, that retreat wasn't dramatic. No white flags. No U-turns. But those slow movements away from the carrier group spoke volumes. They were done. Tension deflated. And they left. Not because they were forced, but because they were strategically outmaneuvered. Without a single round fired. It's a reminder that not all military power is explosive. Sometimes, it's posture. Sometimes, it's patience. And sometimes, it's just being the adult in the room while the other side is playing games they don't fully understand. The quiet confidence of the US Navy in this moment can't be overstated. That kind of response doesn't come from guessing, it comes from years of operational discipline. From knowing exactly how close is too close. From understanding maritime law down to the letter, and from having the backing to stand your ground without needing to raise your voice. And let's not forget that helicopter. The M60R Seahawk isn't just window dressing. It's the Navy's eyes in the sky, packed with sensors, radar, and surveillance tech that can spot threats before they even know they're threats. In this case, it wasn't just watching, it was broadcasting a presence. Hovering above, calmly observing. That alone might have done more to de-escalate than anything said on the radio. Because again, there was no radio talk. And that silence, that was the ultimate flex. No threats, no panic, no over-explaining. Just a calm, unspoken, "We're not leaving. We're not moving. Try us." What's fascinating is how different this could have gone. Any wrong move to sharp a turn, too close a pass, even the wrong visual signal could have flipped the script from tension to conflict. That's how fragile these maritime encounters can be. But instead of chaos, we got a masterclass in control, in how to own a moment without pushing it past the line. And this incident wasn't a one-off. This is part of a broader pattern, one that shows how nations like Venezuela and others are increasingly testing the resolve of major powers, hoping to carve out influence through ambiguity. But ambiguity doesn't work when the other side is clear, firm, and unmoved. And when that restraint holds the line, and the other side backs down, that's not just a win. That's deterrence in its purest form. So what now? Meanwhile, military strategists, analysts, and governments around the world took notes. Because this wasn't just about Venezuela. It was a public example of how the US Navy handles rising maritime tensions in a way that sets a precedent. And that precedent, you can push, but if you cross the line, it won't be with words or warnings, it'll be with calm, deliberate action that leaves no room for confusion. The US Navy isn't in the business of drama, but it is in the business of presence. And when that presence is unwavering, professional, and quiet, it's louder than any cannon. The part that sticks with you, the part that really lingers, is just how close it all came to tipping over the edge. 3 Venezuelan ships, full throttle, barreling toward a U.S. carrier group with zero communication. No dialogue, no coordination, just raw, visual assertion in a part of the ocean that doesn't belong to anyone, not by law, not by international consensus, not by reality. That wasn't just bold, it was calculated. Venezuela didn't need to win anything militarily. That was never the point. What they wanted was to send a message, to stir tension, to say, we're here, and we're watching, even if they were doing it from a position of extremely limited leverage. But here's where it backfired. When your opponent refuses to acknowledge the game, your move falls flat. The U.S. Navy's response wasn't just quiet, it was clinical. These aren't the kinds of operators who get caught up in theatrics. This is a force trained for decades on how to not take the bait. Because in international waters, every inch of your response is a message to the world. And the U.S. was speaking fluent restraint. What Venezuela might not have fully accounted for is how good the U.S. is at this. How they've spent years in contested waters around the globe, South China Sea, Persian Gulf, you name it, practicing these exact scenarios. This wasn't new. It wasn't uncharted. And that muscle memory, that's what kept this from turning into a headline about escalation. Now, think about that helicopter again. The M60R Seahawk wasn't just watching, it was proving a point. That you can't outmaneuver eyes in the sky. That your fast boats and flag signals mean very little when a multi-million-dollar surveillance platform is above you, tracking every movement, every heat signature, every inch of your formation. Venezuela's patrol vessels were aggressive, sure, but they were also exposed. And when they saw the U.S. hold position, when the USS gravely cut across their intercept path without fanfare or threats, just a firm, tactical no, that's when the game started to fall apart. They backed off. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually, like a bluff that didn't land. Like a move that lost momentum the second it didn't get the reaction it was hoping for. There's something deeply psychological about that kind of retreat. It's not defeat in the traditional sense, but it's submission to reality. It's the realization that all the aggressive formation, all the silent signaling, isn't going to rewrite maritime law or force a superpower to blink. And that's what the U.S. Navy proved here. That discipline beats provocation. That posture beats performance. That sometimes the most powerful move you can make is not moving at all. Because here's what Venezuela did prove. They were willing to step up and try something risky. But what they didn't prove is that it meant anything. The rules didn't change. The carrier strike group didn't stop. The sea lanes stayed open. And as far as international observers go, this was a reminder that the U.S. doesn't just claim dominance, it demonstrates it. Not with fireworks, but with calm, unshakable confidence. That's how you maintain maritime freedom. That's how you draw lines without firing flares. And that's how you win the kind of confrontation that isn't about ships or weapons, but about will. So if you're watching all this unfold from the sidelines, thinking, what happens next? Well, the answer is probably more of the same. More silent tests, more subtle pushes, more probing at the edges of what's acceptable. But the U.S. Navy has made its position clear. No drama, no deviation, just steady presence, strategic patience, and the understanding that sometimes the strongest flex is knowing you don't need to prove anything at all. If you're into breakdowns like this where the tension is real, the stakes are global, and the power plays are quiet but calculated, go ahead and like the video, leave a comment with your take, and subscribe so you don't miss the next time calm head stop chaos dead in its tracks.